they told us it was all in our heads. Whispers about secret government projects, mind control, poisoned cities, staged wars, all dismissed as lunacy, conspiracy talk, just paranoia. But what if we told you some of it was real, not distorted, not exaggerated, documented, verified, and buried? Until now. Welcome to the big picture. Tonight we pull back the curtain on US conspiracies once dismissed as madness, now proven fact. Classified documents, buried truths, projects the government swore never existed. But they did. And the last conspiracy? It ran silently for over 40 years, right beneath our feet. Stick around, you'll want to see this. Let's start with one of the mind-bending projects, literally, mind-bending. In the 1950s, a CIA operative suddenly snapped. He ran wild through the streets of Washington, D.C., convinced that every car behind him had a monster. People called him mad. But what no one knew then was that he had just become an unwitting subject in one of the CIA's darkest experiments, MKUltra. It all started in the shadows of government buildings during the tense days of the Cold War. The CIA, led by Director Allen Dulles, launched MKUltra with one terrifying goal: control the human mind. And they put a chemist named Sidney Gottlieb in charge. His mission? To break minds and rebuild them in whatever way they wanted. And they hid this nightmare in plain sight. Over 80 institutions, colleges, hospitals, even prisons acted as cover for them. 149 sub-projects were launched. Innocent people were dosed with LSD, barbiturates, and even heroin, often without ever knowing it. Some were locked away in isolation. Others were tortured with electric shocks. And consent was never part of the equation. One case still chills the bones. Frank Olson, a U.S. Army biochemist, was dosed with LSD secretly during a retreat. 9 days later, he fell 13 stories from a hotel window. The official story was suicide, but many believe the CIA silenced him. Then in 1973, CIA Director Richard Helms ordered the destruction of all MKUltra files, but some survived. In 1975, the Church Committee uncovered part of the truth. 2 years later, a FOIA request revealed 20,000 documents. No names, no trials, no justice, just shattered minds and buried secrets. MKUltra was not a myth. It was real, and it left behind a silence louder than truth. But CIA wasn't the only government agency with blood on its hands. In the shadows of American democracy, the FBI launched one of its darkest operations, COINTELPRO. It began in 1956 under J. Edgar Hoover, not with arrests, but with silence. Whisper campaigns, wiretaps, friendships turned to suspicion, movements began to fracture. First, they targeted communists, but soon the focus shifted to civil rights leaders, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, the Black Panthers, anyone who challenged the status quo. Phones were bugged, fake letters were sent, lies were planted. The FBI even mailed Dr. King a letter urging him to commit suicide. Then in 1965, Malcolm X was assassinated amid growing internal conflict, some of it likely fueled by planted FBI disinformation. Even then, the files remained locked until 1971. While the world watched Fight of the Century between Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier, a group of activists broke into an FBI office in Media, Pennsylvania. They exposed thousands of classified files. The press ran the story. America was shocked. Ali himself had been targeted for opposing the Vietnam War. The Church Committee later called COINTELPRO illegal, but no one was punished. And it didn't end there. After 9/11, the same tactics reappeared. FBI paid informants to lead innocent Muslim Americans into fake terror plots. Courts believed weak evidence, but lives were shattered again, this time in silence. COINTELPRO was not just a chapter, it was a method, and in many ways, the story still continues. But not just the CIA or FBI, even the US government has been caught in jaw-dropping scandals. June 17, 1972, a late-night security guard at the Watergate Hotel noticed something strange, tape covering a door lock. Feeling suspicious, he called the police. When police arrived, they found 5 men hiding inside the Democratic National Committee office, armed with wiretaps, cameras, lockpicks, and $5,300. This wasn't just a burglary. It was the beginning of the biggest political scandal in US history. At first, it seemed like a random break-in. But 2 reporters, Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein, weren't buying it. With help from an anonymous informant, codenamed Deep Throat, they uncovered a dark truth. The trail of money led straight to President Nixon's re-election campaign. But Nixon claimed he knew nothing. Until an explosive tape surfaced. Recorded just days after the break-in, it revealed Nixon and his aide plotting to obstruct the FBI's investigation. This smoking gun tape sealed his fate. By 1974, facing impeachment, Nixon resigned, the first US president to do so. Though he avoided jail thanks to a presidential pardon, Watergate forever shattered America's trust in its leaders and exposed just how deep government corruption can run. The US government even went against its own words. For years, officials denied it, calling it a rumor, mere whispers and shadowy corridors. People heard about a secret link between Iran, hostages, and rebels in distant lands. But no one believed the government could break its own laws and lie to its citizens. Between 1981 and 1986, senior U.S. officials secretly sold over 1,500 missiles to Iran, despite strict arms embargoes. They claimed it was to free American hostages in Lebanon. But that was far from the truth. The real secret? The money from these illegal arms sales funneled to fund the Contras, rebels fighting Nicaragua's Sandinista government. Congress had banned any support to the Contras through the Boland Amendment, but the Reagan administration ignored it. They set up secret networks, concealed the transactions, and kept Congress and the public in the dark. The scandal broke in 1986 when Lebanese magazine Ash-Shira exposed the covert operation. Investigations followed, 14 officials charged, 11 convicted, but only one served jail time. President George H.W. Bush later pardoned 6 conspirators. So this wasn't just a rumor. It was a shocking conspiracy that shattered trust and showed how far some in power would go behind closed doors. Now, if we look back a little, we find stories that sound unbelievable until they're proven true. One of the wildest is Operation Gladio, once dismissed as Cold War paranoia. Secret armies hidden across Europe? Many thought it was just a myth, until bodies started falling. In 1980, a bomb exploded at Bologna train station in Italy, killing 85 and injuring over 200. Officials blamed left-wing extremists, but the attack was too precise, too calculated. Whispers grew of a shadowy force behind the scenes. Then in 1990, Italy's Prime Minister Giulio Andreotti confirmed Gladio existed, a NATO-backed secret army funded by the CIA and MI6, meant to resist Soviet invasion. Such stay-behind armies were set up in at least 12 countries, including Italy, France, and Germany. Italy alone had 622 hidden weapons sites and 15,000 operatives by the 70s. But Andreotti denied Gladio's involvement in the wave of bombings from 1969 to 1984. Italy's Communist Party disagreed, linking Gladio to terrorismo nero, neo-fascist attacks like Bologna. 4 neo-fascists were jailed. Licio Gelli, head of the secretive P2 Masonic Lodge, got 7 years for his ties, until the verdict was mysteriously overturned, sparking national outrage. Even a former CIA agent claimed that CIA funneled money to P2 throughout the 1970s, but no US or NATO officials were ever charged. Now, what if your own government planned to attack its own people, just to start a war? In 1962, a chilling proposal landed on President John F. Kennedy's desk. It was called Operation Northwoods, a top-secret plan signed by General Lyman Lemnitzer, then head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And it wasn't just theory. It was real, documented, authorized at the highest levels, just waiting for President's approval. The plan? Fake a series of violent attacks to blame on Cuba. We're talking about bombing U.S. cities, sinking boats full of Cuban refugees, and even faking the shoot-down of a civilian jet, repainted to look like an American military plane. They even discussed assassinating Cuban immigrants and staging terrorist acts in major U.S. cities, all to manipulate public outrage and gain support for a full-scale invasion of Cuba. And this wasn't a movie script, it was almost reality. President Kennedy was horrified. He shut it down and soon removed Lemnitzer from his position, and Operation Northwoods remained buried for decades. But when it was finally declassified, it revealed a dark truth. Sometimes, the biggest threats to freedom can come from those sworn to protect it. Now, do you remember the time when people used to say, "Relax, no one's watching you"? But what if they always were? For decades, the idea of mass government surveillance was dismissed as paranoia. Just another conspiracy theory, right? But behind locked doors, America was watching. Not just enemies, but its own citizens and the whole world. It began in 1919 with the Black Chamber, secretly intercepting mail without warrants. After World War II, Project Shamrock escalated things, quietly collecting hundreds of thousands of telegrams each week. Then came 1952. President Truman founded the NSA in total secrecy. Most Americans didn't even know it existed. But after 9/11, everything changed. The Patriot Act opened the floodgates for surveillance in the name of national security. Then in 2013, whistleblower Edward Snowden revealed just how deep it went. He leaked thousands of classified documents and revealed a staggering reality. The NSA was collecting billions of communications daily, emails, calls, messages, from tech giants like Google and Apple, using a program called PRISM. Snowden's leaks shocked the world. He exposed global surveillance operations and fled to Russia to avoid US prosecution. In 2020, a US court ruled the mass surveillance illegal and possibly unconstitutional. But the systems remain. What began as rumor became reality. One of the biggest conspiracy theories in American history wasn't a theory at all. It was true. Just like how climate change is true. And Exxon knew about climate change nearly 50 years ago, but they didn't care. In 1977, Exxon's own scientist, James Black, gave top executives a chilling message. Burning fossil fuels was heating the earth, and fast. He warned that humanity had a 5 to 10-year window to act before the damage became irreversible. The science was clear and the danger was real. So what did Exxon do? They went silent. Behind closed doors, the oil giant launched secret research, built advanced climate models, and even studied how carbon dioxide is absorbed by the oceans for over a decade. Their science was cutting edge, more accurate than much of what the public had access to at the time. But while they quietly confirmed that climate change was real and caused by fossil fuels, Exxon told the world a different story. They said the science was uncertain. They spent over $30 million funding think tanks that spread misinformation. They helped form the Global Climate Coalition to cast doubt on climate science. And in 1998, they helped kill the Kyoto Protocol, a global treaty aimed at cutting emissions. Why? Because once the truth got out, their billion-dollar profits were at risk. And this wasn't ignorance, it was strategy, one eerily similar to Big Tobacco's denial of the dangers of smoking. In fact, Exxon even hired the same PR consultants to manipulate public opinion. By the time NASA warned Congress about global warming in 1988, Exxon already knew. But instead of stepping up, they chose deception. And the price? Devastating. Today, half of all carbon pollution in the atmosphere was released after 1988. After they could have made a difference. But instead of protecting the planet, Exxon chose to protect their bottom line. So here's the real twist. Climate change wasn't just a natural disaster. It was a man-made betrayal. And it started in a corporate boardroom. Another man-made betrayal led Americans to war in 1990. A young girl stepped up to the microphone, trembling with fear. The room went deadly silent. They took babies right out of incubators, she said, her voice breaking. Left them to die on the cold floor. Gasps echoed, cameras flashed, lawmakers wiped tears, and suddenly the world turned its eyes to Iraq. The nation was gripped, and so was the president. George H.W. Bush cited her testimony as a key reason to back war against Iraq. Her name was Nayirah, a 15-year-old, who claimed she'd witnessed Iraqi soldiers' brutal acts during their invasion of Kuwait. Her words flooded every news outlet, turning public opinion overnight and helping spark the Gulf War. A coalition of 42 countries led by the US marched to free Kuwait. But something wasn't adding up. 2 years later, the truth came crashing down. Investigative reporters uncovered that Nayirah wasn't a nurse or a refugee as she claimed. She was the daughter of Kuwait's ambassador to the US, coached by Hill & Knowlton, an American PR firm hired to sway American hearts and minds. Even Amnesty International had believed her and published a report. But when the war ended, they rechecked everything and found no proof. The incubator baby's story? Completely fabricated. But the damage? Already done. One lie, one speech, and America went to war. So how much truth do we demand before sending troops? How many lives were changed because of one lie? Well, in the case of the Tuskegee Syphilis Study, far too many. They told them it was about bad blood, free checkups, hot meals, a burial fund. For 600 poor black men in Tuskegee, Alabama, it sounded like mercy in the middle of the Great Depression. But behind the smiles and the needles was a lie soaked in cruelty. 399 of them had syphilis. They were never told, never treated. The U.S. Public Health Service, with help from the CDC and Tuskegee University, watched them rot away, slowly, painfully, just to see what the disease would do. Some of these men went blind, lost their minds, their hearts failed, their bones rotted, and the doctors kept watching. By 1947, penicillin was a known cure, but they were denied it. Physicians in the area were ordered not to help. Even when the men begged, even when their wives cried. They were nothing but lab rats in a 40-year experiment. They used spinal taps as treatment, called it free care. One letter told them it was their last chance for special treatment. But it was a trap. In 1972, whistleblower Peter Buxton finally broke the silence. The New York Times exposed the horror. But the damage had been done. 28 men died directly from syphilis, over 100 from complications. 40 wives were infected. 19 children were born with the disease. Generations scarred. The government paid a $10 million settlement. President Bill Clinton publicly apologized in 1997, calling it shameful and racist. But not one doctor, not one official, not a single soul was punished. This wasn't medicine. It was a betrayal. And it left behind a wound deeper than disease. A legacy of distrust that still echoes in African American communities to this day. So, where do we go from here? Simple. Keep digging. keep questioning. In a world full of shadows, truth hides in plain sight, but it only comes out when someone's brave enough to look. Don't just take things at face value. Verify, speak up, share what you've learned. Be the one who asks the questions others are too afraid to voice, because some secrets stay buried until someone dares to uncover them. And this was just the beginning. Part 2 is coming, and trust me, it only gets deeper from here. So like, subscribe, and stay tuned.